The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Cooper Kupp's time with the Los Angeles Rams is close to coming to an end.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast.
So, breaking news, Cooper Kupp is most likely not going to be on the Rams next season. And how do we know this? Well, Cooper Kupp went to his own social media to reveal that the Rams are looking to trade him immediately. Cooper Kupp wrote, quote, "I was informed that the team will be seeking a trade immediately and will be working with me and my family to find the right place to continue competing for championships. I don't agree with the decision, and I always believed it was going to begin and end in LA. Still, if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, there are so many things that are out of your control, but it is how you respond to these things that you will look back on and remember. I have taken so much pride in playing alongside my teammates for the LA community, so thank you for embracing my family and making this such a special place for us. 2024 began with one of the best training camps of my career. Preparations start now for 2025. Highly motivated, as healthy as ever, and looking forward to playing elite football for years to come. Love you guys, but coming for it all." So that definitely hits pretty bad. I mean, that definitely tugs on the heartstrings. I mean, we knew that this is something that was coming. I prepped you guys for this really for a long, long time. And I told you before that sometimes we need to have uncomfortable conversations on this team. It can't be all sunshine and rainbows for the Los Angeles Rams and for the players that you love, that I love, that we've seen win championships and have great seasons and, most importantly, give us great moments, right? We see Cooper Kupp, we think Super Bowl 56. We see Cooper Kupp, we think of love of the game route. We think of the year that he had. We think of what he's meant to not just this team as far as on-field success, but he's meant to this community. Cooper Kupp was one of the first guys that you really wanted to buy his jersey and that you really wanted to have be one of your favorite players when the Rams returned to Los Angeles. And he is someone that will never be forgotten for ushering in this new era of Rams football as they came back to Los Angeles. You look at 2021, Triple Crown winner, 145 catches, 1,947 receiving yards, had 16 touchdowns. He was incredible. Unfortunately, it's the time after that which is leading to the news that we got today. 2022, he struggled to stay on the field. He played just 9 games. Then he missed training camp in parts of 2023, missed time during training camp. 2024, the same thing with the injury. He's only played in 12 games in each of the last 2 seasons. And then you add the fact that from a statistical standpoint, he just isn't that same guy that he was. You're seeing someone that struggles to get separation, struggles to have any sort of explosive plays. He finished the year this year with 5 straight games of less than 70 yards receiving. Then you add the fact that he's entering his age 32 season. So you combine all those factors with the contract situation that he's currently in. Well, it's not a surprise that the Rams are going this direction, because you had to make a decision with Cooper Kupp at some point, and you knew that Les Snead and this team was going to handle this in a respectful way. They were going to handle this in a way that was best for themselves, but also looking out for Cooper Kupp and doing right by Cooper Kupp. I think of Jalen Ramsey going to the Dolphins. I think of moves like that where they don't want to have a situation like this spread where it's not a good move from an optics standpoint, so other players out there don't view the Rams as a favorable destination, right? The Rams realize that the culture is to take care of their players any way they can, But the writing was on the wall with this. We knew that this was possible because of the contract situation. We'll get into that in a second here. But also, what happened at the deadline? The Rams were reportedly open to trading Cooper Kupp before the deadline this past season. But unfortunately, really nothing came about just because the Rams at the time were seeking a second-round pick in exchange for Cooper Kupp. And they were willing to take on and eat some of his 2024 salary just to get a deal done. The Rams were willing to do that. There was some talk that the Chiefs could be a potential option before they were able to make that move for DeAndre Hopkins. Nothing came of it. And then after, I remember Sean McVay telling us that some of those reports were this and that, and he just kind of downplayed all those reports. He kind of questioned the validity of those reports, but there was definitely some smoke there. And I can tell you that the Rams certainly were exploring that at the time. And remember, at the time, there was no guarantee that the Rams were going to win the NFC West and win a playoff game and make it to the divisional round. At the time, that was not a foregone conclusion. Thankfully, they did turn their season around, and Cooper Kupp did have some moments. There's no doubt about that. But the Rams have had this front of mind as far as their roster build for some time now. And right now, as far as the trade goes, the question is there a team out there that's going to be willing to take on his current deal? And that is a $12.5 million salary this year and a $14.85 million salary in 2026. So that is a number for a Cooper Kupp that, yeah, statistically, he's not there where he was. He's not playing at a Pro Bowl level. He's not playing at an all-pro level. Could he still help a team? I still certainly think he can. And just reading what he said in his post, this is going to be a very, 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 very motivated Cooper Kupp that is going to want to send a message to the Rams. I don't care what he says and how amicable this separation is. He's going to want to prove to the Rams. He's going to want the Rams to see him have a great season. That is going to be the motivating factor for him. So I think that a team out there looking to trade for him needs to consider that, because Kupp's always been a fighter. Remember, this is someone that didn't go to Alabama or LSU or Ohio State or any of these wide receiver U's. No, this is someone who came out of Eastern Washington, and the Rams selected him in the third round. It was Sean McVay's first draft with the team, and he came out of the gates right away, and he proved doubters wrong. He had 62 catches for 869 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie, and he only got better. He only improved from then on. So he knows what it's like to play with a chip on his shoulder, and that's certainly going to be a very motivating factor. And if I'm a team out there that has any interest in Cooper Kupp and I'm looking to upgrade that position, I'm considering it.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. How about a Broadway show? Can't wait to take my kids to Broadway. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Seeing live performers, it's the best. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Myles Garrett trade request.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade. I will read you briefly here the statement that he put out through the NFL Network. It says, quote, "As a kid dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. And that goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man that I am today. While I've loved calling the city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. which keep that line specifically in mind, because we will draw back to that here momentarily. It's an important one. It has always been to compete and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns, signed Myles Garrett. And this was some bombshell news that I don't. Here's the thing. It's surprising, but it's also not surprising. It's surprising in that, and this is my perspective on it, and maybe you feel differently. But from my perspective, like, these comments first came up late in the season. It was week 16, leading into the Bengals game. He was asked about his future, and he did leave the door open for the first time at that point on a potential opportunity to go elsewhere. He made it a possibility that he would not finish his career with the Cleveland Browns, which was it was shocking to all of us on that day, because nobody saw that coming. Nobody expected that. And at the time, it could be written off as different things. Like, maybe he's making a play for a contract extension, which we know he's going in. He's now not the highest paid defensive player anymore. He probably wants to be going to the last couple of years of his current deal. That all makes sense. It adds up. I kind of lean that way. Like, it felt like, okay, he's saying this because he's the only person in the organization that can, and he does want to hold the organization's feet to the fire a little bit here. But when push comes to shove, Myles Garrett is not leaving this team. Like, that was never a question in my mind, dating back to that moment and him saying those things. And he did say, like, he wanted to hear the plan from the team and what they want to do going forward. Now, after those conversations, he has given indications that he feels like the team isn't as far off as maybe some on the outside think it was. He literally said that in one of the last episodes of the in-season Hard Knocks, that I think the line was something along in the wording of, we're not as far off as it might seem to people. And so, like, that was all to me telling that, like, okay, they had conversations. They must have gone pretty well. They laid out their plan for the future to Myles and said, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to stay competitive. We're not blowing this thing up. And clearly something changed, or he just maybe didn't buy it from the start and he was just saying that for the cameras on Hard Knocks. Who knows? But something changed. And now we're left, in the situation where Myles Garrett is officially requesting a trade. I honestly, like, I kind of wondered if something changed during the Pro Bowl weekend, like the Pro Bowl festivities. Was he having conversations with potential other teammates that he could be teaming up with? Did he, did people make fun of him for the 3-14 season? The fact that he's rotting away on a bad team this past year? I don't know. Sometimes those relationships and those conversations do come into play for guys who see greener pastures elsewhere, and they decide, hey, I want to go chase championships and team up with some of these other guys. I think that's more prevalent in sports than ever before. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the sole reason, but it did kind of make me speculate or wonder if that had anything to do with it. The fact that he was at the Pro Bowl this weekend around guys who he obviously has great relationships with, and some of the other best players in this league, and he's sitting there like, man, where is our team coming up short? So I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my end, but I did find the timing of that kind of interesting, especially given that it sounded like he was okay with whatever the team laid out as their plans moving forward in the weeks since making those comments, in the weeks since the season ended. Clearly, that's not the case. And so now there are so many different tentacles, so many different branch realities or alternatives that kind of come off of this main topic of Myles Garrett requesting a trade. And we'll have plenty of time this week to dissect each and every single one of them and attack this topic in this story from all those different angles. But I think where I want to start is that this changes the math on everything the Browns had planned this offseason. Whatever plan they laid out to Myles, whatever they were sort of selling him as our path forward to staying competitive and still trying to chase championships, whatever that was, if Myles Garrett's requesting a trade, you throw it out the window. It's gone. It is time officially to blow it up. And I have been, well, as you might know from watching this show or hearing me on other platforms that I work on or in other spaces, you know that I have been staunchly against blowing this thing up and starting from scratch, because that doesn't guarantee anything. Look what it got the Browns. 2 playoff wins in a 4-year span, or 2 playoff appearances in a 4-year span, 1 playoff win, and a window that now looks like it's closing even more abruptly than anybody thought could be possible to chase championships. Like, it still didn't get you the ultimate prize. So I'm generally against blowing it up. But if Myles Garrett is going to force his way out, and if this thing is going to get ugly, because right now the organization is saying we're not going to move on from him. Andrew Berry said that. at his end of season press conference, he had that line in there about the direct path from Cleveland to Canton for Myles Garrett, which again, something that Myles Garrett referenced in his statement, which makes me think like behind the scenes, like maybe he's not as happy with this organization or Andrew Berry's plans or whatever as he might have let on, because for him to sort of take a shot like that at Andrew Berry's direct quote from his press conference is incredible. I mean, there's something there as to why he did that, especially, and this is again, Myles Garrett was a guy who was saying towards the end of the season, as long as these guys are in place, as long as the people in power are still here, I feel comfortable with this group, which is part of the reason why I'm assuming they didn't why the Hasms decided to stick with this group moving forward, because they probably trusted them as much as Myles Garrett trusts them. Now I think that gets called into question. And so as you talk about blowing it up, there's so many more levels to that as well of, do you trust Andrew Berry to be the one to sort of do the rebuild here? Do you trust Andrew Berry to lead this team into the next, era of whatever this looks like and get the team back to prominence as quickly as possible? Those are all questions we can explore at a later time. But I do think in my heart of hearts, like, this has to mean you start over. If Myles Garrett wants a trade, and he is forcing his way out and he's going to make this thing as ugly as possible, you're no longer playing for championships. You're no longer playing to win because you're losing your cornerstone player. You are planning for the future, not winning now. That is what you're playing for if Myles Garrett really forces his way out of Cleveland. It's just plain and simple. You're trading him for picks. That's what it's going to be. You are going to trade him for draft compensation that allows you to stockpile as many talented players in the next couple of years of drafts as possible and build this roster again from the ground up. Again, we can have questions and conversations about whether or not Andrew Berry is the right person for that task. And I get it. Like, I'm doing a really sharp pivot here from being the guy who's like, I don't think the roster is that far off. I don't think you have to blow it up. I don't think you have to start all over. It doesn't guarantee you anything. That was all before thinking Myles Garrett really was going to force his way out of here. With that in context and that new story and this new this new part of this equation, I can't figure out, like, a lot of my take on that centered around, well, you have a cornerstone player, Myles Garrett, that you can still build around, who's in the prime of his career. You have some other cornerstone players, but once Myles is gone, that changes the math on everything. You don't have that generational talent anymore if he gets traded. So I know it's a sharp pivot, like I said, but for me, this has to be now a complete change of plans. Whatever your plans were this offseason to bolster the roster around what you already have, forget it. Assuming they're actually going to trade him, because again, they're digging their feet in the sand and saying they won't, which I do want to talk about coming up. But if they actually, if Myles Garrett trade happens, if they can't mend fences, and I think that's going to be harder to do than probably what it seems, you have to, I think, pivot to a completely different plan of, let's accumulate draft capital. Let's draft as many players as we think are going to help us and reconstruct this roster this offseason, and focus on what next offseason looks like as well. Get draft compensation for 2026 and figure out how we can get this franchise, turn this roster over into a contending team in the future rather than right now. That's just plain and simple. My whole premise initially centered around Myles Garrett was going to be here. He was going to still be your cornerstone player, and you have pieces and parts to build around. You'd still have some of those guys. Denzel Ward hasn't requested a trade. There's other players that are foundational pieces that could still potentially still be here beyond a Myles Garrett trade situation. Although maybe that changes too. If they see Myles once out, maybe others want out. Who knows? But sitting here today, my plan hinged on you still have that generational talent in Myles Garrett on this roster, and you can't let that go to waste. Without that player, changes everything. And so I do think this is now a situation where the Browns have to consider blowing it up this offseason and rethink whatever they were going to do this offseason, throw it out, scrap it, start fresh, and focus on draft accumulation, draft capital accumulation, draft talent from the next couple years coming out of the college ranks accumulation, and build this roster back to prominence from the ground up. I think that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy for you to get in on the action. And with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature will also allow you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's just icing on the cake. And one bet that you could look at with that $5 could be on the NBA tonight. Let's check it out. The Indiana Pacers continue a westward road trip to face the Portland Trailblazers, and are favored. FanDuel likes the Pacers by 5 points. The Pacers are on a bit of a heater, so maybe they can keep up that momentum. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you can score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
It's official. OC stands for officially Kaylee.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Sarge.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hickman.
This was a move that a lot of people wanted. Some people were opposed to. There was still confusion around Nick Caley being the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. But Nick Caley, former Rams tight end coach and passing game coordinator. He's a guy that went to John Carroll. So the connections between Nick Caserio and Nick Caley are there. Spent nearly a decade with the New England Patriots. The last couple of seasons has soaked in a lot. Culture matters. Culture matters. The last couple of seasons, he soaked in a lot of knowledge from Sean McVay and what a successful offense looked like. Sarge, before we dive into the decision to bring in and hire Nick Caley, I want to read an excerpt I read from Jordan Rodriguez, who was talking about the Rams offense and how much it commands from the quarterback. This is where she said the Rams veteran quarterback scans the defense across from him, shouting words to teammates that reveal any number of details that he sees and gets them into or out of different plays and protections. He receives as many as 3 calls from head coach Sean McVay, and these have tags attached to them, which are words or phrases that either clarify the call or help teammates understand any adjustments in the offensive protections that may come. Adjustments is hopefully what the Houston Texans are getting from Nick Caley as their new offensive coordinator. Sarge, what are your thoughts?
Well, John, I'll tell you this. I'm not upset. I'm not happy. I'm not sad. I'm curious. And what I like what the Houston Texans did was they went out and they got a position coach. Bobby had never coached a position when D'Amico Ryans brought him here. John, listen, I'm at Madison Square Garden right now with the Houston Rockets taking on the New York Knicks. And all this is starting to happen right now. So I'm like, basketball, Ime Udoka was named coach of the month. Football, they got an offense coordinator. So just give me a second and work with me. But John, I'm curious to see, and I think that what they did was they put their finger on the pulse of someone that Nick Caserio knew, someone has coached a position of need, because that tight end's position is really, really interesting when it comes to what you're going to need from the tight end position as far as the run scheme is concerned, as far as blocking is concerned. I mean, they are a part of the line. And my only pushback would be, this is still a first-year offensive coordinator calling plays. This is not an experienced play caller. I know a lot of people wanted Nick Caley. I know a lot of people were pushing for and advocating for him, but he's still a first-year offensive coordinator. He's still a person that's calling plays for the first time. But what I will say he has on his side, John, is the phone number of Sean McVay, his mentor. He has someone that he can call and run things by, well, until they play, because the Rams and the Rams and the Texans play next season. So I'm pretty sure that Sean is going to put him on do not disturb.
D&D.
Yeah, but he does have the phone number to someone who has been his mentor, someone who does like him. And John, he has 2 years worth of what not to do coming into the Houston Texans. He has 2 years of what not to do with Bobby Sloak. Do not go down this road to Bobby. So he can take, it's one of those things where you can take the good and leave the bad. And now you can go and you can sit down with CJ, because CJ is a huge fan of that Rams offense. He's a huge fan of Sean McVay. He's a huge fan of Matthew Stafford. And at this point of his career, Matthew Stafford is still effective. And if he could still be effective at this part of his career, then that means that CJ sees that could be him, later on down the line. But now if he gets into a system like a Sean McVay system, he can move his career to the trajectory to the trajectory in which he's supposed to be going. One thing that I love about Sean McVay is he's very smart. His mind, he has a brilliant mind. And, even though Bill Belichick tricked him, the week prior to the Super Bowl, but we'll talk about that at another time. For hope that he learned from that, he did, as he won his own Super Bowl. But I like this tree, John, and I like Sean McVay's tree way better than I like Kyle Shanahan's tree.
Sarge, my first initial reaction to that was, I wonder if Houston caught wind of, hey, another team is interested in bringing in Nick Caley to fill their void at offensive coordinator. Nick Caley did meet with Tampa Bay. One of the things that I thought would be a huge failure for Houston and will blow back in their faces if they took too long interviewing a lot of different guys and they miss out on the guy that they actually wanted to bring in. And so kudos to Houston, if that's the case, for bringing in somebody, bringing in Nick Caley and bringing in their guy. But it also feels like for Houston, hey, we like the philosophy and the background of Caley. He already has relationships here in the building, but more so, and I think more important for us to look into is just whether we like the move or not is done. Now let's look at weighing the pros versus the cons and how they stack up to one another. The biggest con, he is not an experienced play caller. He is a first-time play caller. This will be his first year calling plays, and a lot of what we like about Caley is due to the system he's attached to. That was the same thing we said about Bobby Slowick 2 seasons ago. Now the pros are, the system he's attached to is from an offensive guru, Sean McVay, and that system is built around creating adjustments, and by doing that, that allows for an offense to be diverse. Based on what we saw from Houston's run game last year, Caley could come in and boost that offensive line's the offensive line how it's currently constructed and put together because of his time under Sean McVay. And again, a lot of that is due to diversity of the offense, and also the Rams down the stretch of last year throughout the year altogether in 2024, they had to stretch their means. Both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp missed time, and they were able to find guys to come in and do things well, and was able to understand what each receiver, which each playmaker does well, and maximizes that. That's what we wanted to see from an offensive coordinator perspective for the Houston Texans. And what I like most about that is they were able to do that by creating leverage to attack defenses when they use the motion, pre-snap motions. Los Angeles was averaging 1.4 more yards per play, and the success rate was 8% higher when pre-snap motion was used. Ultimately, this was an offense that had to stretch their means a lot last season and Houston did not do a very good job consistently in maximizing their guys when things broke down, didn't create counter punches, and kept running into a brick wall, literally, right? Whether it was screen plays not going anywhere or outside zone runs that were not going anywhere, or we had to see Joe Mixon make a little out of nothing. So the hope with Caley is he is an extension of Sean McVay and LaFleur. It's nearly impossible to revamp an entire offense in one offseason. So with that being said, this guy feels like more of a solution base for the NFL, for the Houston Texans, and he got the job. And I think overall, the question, what could you have done with our roster last year to get the most out of? Jeff Nixon, could he answer that question well? Brian Johnson, did he answer that question well? Out of all of the other candidates, did they answer that question well? And I come away feeling like the pro is Nick Caley may have answered that question the best out of all of those guys, and he became Houston's number one target.
John, I look at it like this, and I love what you said about the con and what we mentioned earlier is that he hasn't called plays, and that's another You know, when you have to call when you have to call plays, there's a step up that you have to do, and you have to be prepared for any and everything. And so hopefully Sean McVay has prepared him to be able to make in-game adjustments, something that Bobby Slowick suffered from. But I think that one of the pros for him, and it works for him, and it works for him right now, is the Patriots South stigma has passed. Because if this would have been
Good point. Good point.
If this would have been a hire 2 years ago, when they hired D'Amico, they would have tried to bring in him, Nick Caley, then it would have been the same. Oh, so y'all haven't gotten Patriots South out of your system just yet. But Nick is now able to bring in a guy after having D'Amico for 2 years and after having, experimented with Bobby Slowick those 2 years. And now he's saying, okay, let me go and get somebody that I know. And this is how, like we talked about before, John, this is how corporate America works. Most of the time, the people that you know are the ones who get the jobs. The people that are doing the hiring go and they hire the people that they know. And so, not only does his background help him with Nick Caserio, the fact that he has the resume to go along with the relationship. So that's what I want when people, when people are R&R, no, not rest and relaxation. It's resume and relationships.